Welcome to the Line Movement MMA Betting Show. I'm Daniel Levy from Best Fight Picks and Half the Battle, joined once again by Dan Tom of MMA Junkie and the Protect Your Neck podcast. Today we're going to be talking UFC 255 because Deiveson Figueiredo, Davey God of War, is taking on Alex Perez for the flyweight title. We're going to get into the whole card. Obviously, our Canadian listeners, you got to know to go to blitzbet.eu for all your betting needs. Now, Dan Tom, it's been 2 long weeks without you. I've missed you dearly. Shout out to James Lynch for stepping up during your absence. But, man, how the hell you doing?
Man, massive shout out to James Lynch and everyone else behind the scenes. It's good to be back. It's good to see your beautiful face. It's good to be here talking betting on the Line Movement Betting Show. Of course, I know y'all are subscribed and y'all been waiting, right? But no, you guys been holding down the fort just fine. Hopefully you guys did well these last few weeks. I have, and man, I'm just pumped to be back.
It's great to have you back, Dan Tom. And I mean, let's do what we do best. Let's talk fights, man, because in the main event, we got the flyweight champion, Deiveson Figueiredo. He's taking on Alex Perez. And man, I think a lot of people don't give Deiveson Figueiredo the credit he deserves. You know, I view this guy as someone who not only made the flyweight division great again, because I don't know if you recall, but no disrespect to the great Demetrius Johnson, but back when he was champion, they were talking about shutting the division down. I know you remember that, Dan Tom. They were saying that, oh, the flyweights don't put butts in seats, the flyweights don't put on exciting fights. And listen, not that I agree with them, because I definitely don't, but like, you know, when you're having title fights with Demetrius Johnson and Chris Carriasso, Demetrius Johnson, Tim Elliott, I understand why people were getting fed up. But then you had Henry Cejudo come in there, dethrone Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, knocks out TJ Dillashaw in 30 seconds, vacates the belt. Now you got this guy in Deiveson Figueiredo, and he can't help himself but deliver the violence. So I love our flyweight champion, Dan Tom.
Yeah, man, I agree with you, and I mean, I can get why people maybe like casuals haven't caught on to the train yet or whatnot, but I have a hard time seeing people not get excited about this guy. That still boggles my mind. Regardless if you're picking him or not, or picked against him in the past, you cannot deny the man's skills and absolute destruction that he brings to the table. In fact, I was thinking about like fights that I always wanted to see, and you think about these dream matchups, and a lot of time it's guys from yesteryear, right, Dan? It's like, oh, Fedor Couture. I wanted to see Shogun versus Musasi, you know, and you can go through these like little fun things, but very few do you have, especially for someone like me who usually is good about putting recency bias in check. Very few do you have guys right in front of you now, Dan, where you're just like, I want to see this guy against Peter Yan as my, dream fight, which I've been calling for Deiveson Figueiredo for like 2 years since before he has the belt. So to see him having the belt, there are opportunities like crazy. I'm excited to talk about this fight. I'm a bit surprised at my own takes of this fight, but regardless of what your takes or picks are, I don't think anybody should be denying Deiveson Figueiredo his potential.
I mean, if you want to be 100% honest and realistic, which we always are, the only criticism for Deiveson Figueiredo, in my opinion, has nothing to do with his fighting abilities. I know some people say, oh, it's first round finish or bust, which is the biggest BS I've ever heard, because last time I checked, he went out there and beat Pantoja 30-27 times 3. All 3 judges scored at 30-27. So this whole he can't win a fight past the first round is complete dog shit. I mean, you saw the first Benavidez fight, submitted him in the second round. The biggest criticism for Deiveson Figueiredo has nothing to do with fighting. It has to do with the weight. You know, this guy's massive for 125 pounds, but I saw a tweet come out that he invested a lot of his money into getting a nutritionist. And to me, Dan Tom, that's the sign of a future long-reigning champion. That's the sign of someone who's serious, who's evolving, who wants to take things to the next level, who wants to go out there and beat Demetrius Johnson's title defense record. And I think if he comes out here and makes a statement against Alex Perez, he's on the right track.
Yeah, I saw that tweet, and I saw your tweet, Dan, and I'm not going to lie. Not only did I already come into this fight leaning toward Figueiredo, let's say I'm at this level, right? When I see a tweet like that, I'd be lying if it didn't boost my enthusiasm as well, where my enthusiasm and leaning toward Figueiredo went up even higher, Dan. However, it was about then where I was about midway into my study, and I start shifting over to the Figueiredo side as well as the Perez side. And after I completed my studies, as we'll break down here, I really surprised myself, man. And before we get to, picks and whatnot, let me just say that regardless of any dissension, which is always healthy dissension here, but I'm not talking about between me and you, Dan. We'll always hash things out every week, no problem. But as far as our listeners and whatnot, you never have to agree with me or jump off the same cliffs as me, folks. First and foremost, I always state that. However, I would argue that this fight could be deceptively closer than the line. I mean, we'll have to see on Saturday, of course, like always, right? But I guess what I'm trying to say is that I went from super confident to not that confident not as confident as to what's going to happen on Saturday. And in fact, Dan, I may be going contrarian, classic Dan Tom here, but I may even be leaning the other way. No disrespect to Figgy. Did the odds make sense to you, man?
Yeah, they absolutely made sense to me. I mean, look, it's easy to sit here and say, well, he was only, a slight favorite against Benavidez. He was a dog the first time, but it's like, did you see how he destroyed Benavidez? Did you see what he did to Benavidez? Did you see how the fight with Pantoja was 30-27 on all three judges' scorecards? You see the improvements in his game. Look, his only loss is to Jussier Formiga, who actually recently got cut from the UFC. But, I mean, if you know the backstory, you know that, listen, after we have something we like to call on Half the Battle the 50K curse. When you get that 50K bonus and all of a sudden you think you're God's gift to planet Earth, you stop training, you stop showing up to the gym, you think, oh, I'm automatically going to whoop the next guy's ass. So he destroyed John Moraga. He, the 50K curse. He goes into his next fight against Formiga, doesn't train. I mean, he shows up, he's got to do a 40-pound weight cut. The guy was somewhere else. It wasn't, and he shows up and he still didn't get submitted or anything like that. So to me, it's like they fight 10 times and hey, Jussier caught him on the one good night that he was going to win that fight. But if they ever fight again with the current focus that Deiveson has, the current form he's in, I think that this guy is going to be a champion for a long time. Look, I respect Alex Perez a lot. He's big for the weight class. He's got heavy hands. He's got good calf kicks. He's got a solid wrestling game. And he's got good experience, too. He's not, jumping in here too early. He's paid his dues. I like the guy a lot, but I've noticed that he is a little bit chinny. He has been submitted before. He has been knocked out before. I don't see him taking the punches of Deiveson Figueiredo. And also, it's easy to sit here and just talk about the knockout power of Deiveson. What about his submission game? What about that fucking armbar attempt in the first Joseph Benavidez fight? What about that rear naked choke, that Mata Leon in the second fight? This guy's jiu-jitsu is actually off the charts from my vantage point. I think he can win by knockout, submission, or decision here.
Yeah, I do think that for one, the gas tank thing is a bit overblown. Although I do think that it's more than fair to say that on paper, if we're going into rounds 3, 4, and 5, that means that chances are Deiveson Figueiredo either didn't hurt Perez like we're thinking, or hurt him enough, and perhaps he could get into some sketchy territory. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that he's got a sketchy gas tank. This guy's a flyweight. He's a super athlete. That is Figueiredo. And that Pantoja fight, Dan, I'm a big Pantoja fan, like I'm a big Benavidez fan. That really impressed me. I picked Pantoja there, but what was missing was kind of the wrestling. Now, Formiga used the wrestling, and you said the 50K curse. I want to page note that because I was actually going to reference that because I was thinking of you in that example. With Deiveson for this fight. Now, obviously, he has the good tweet, right, what we talked about. That's a positive, the weight. He looks in shape if you go to his IG. These are all positives. However, if you also go to his IG, he's already in sweatsuits about 3.5 to 4 days out. That's never a good sign. Unless you're like Phil Davis, a light heavyweight where you've got heavy percentage of body, you've got your own ways of cutting, which Phil was more of an old school guy. He liked to run it out. It's really rare that you see guys start, busting out the sauna suits that early. A guy who was really popular for doing that was Diego Brandao, another kind of inconsistent guy as far as the scales and whatnot. Again, I'm not saying that's a big flag, but I did hear an interview with Waleed House saying he wants to go on the shopping spree. Now, he did say after the fight, thankfully. He did include that. But, he's got the gold, he's got this thing, and it was making me kind of think of that. However, that's not the flag. And the Formiga fight, even though back to the wrestling point, Dan, I don't know if it was so much the 50K thing, but I will say, and this is just adds to your point and Formiga Figueiredo supporters here, is that Deiveson Figueiredo actually had a lot of injuries going into that fight reportedly. So even if you're like me and perhaps leaning on the other side here, you have to take that into account as to why he wasn't defending so well. And yes, Joseph Benavidez, he's a good scrambler, not the best takedown wrestler, even though he is a wrestler still. You got to look at what Figueiredo was doing. And Figueiredo has shown improvements since that Formiga fight in his wrestling. So these are all great check marks. That being said, I still feel like people who can wrestle and not just wrestle, people who aren't afraid to initiate. Again, Dan, back to the thing where I agree. Figueiredo is not just a first round fighter. That being said, he gets that stereotype because he is so strong in the first round, right? And I think supporters and detractors can both agree on this. That being said, sometimes pressuring the knockout puncher is kind of the best thing to do. It doesn't make sense. You go Roy McDonald, Tyron Woodley, right? Sometimes crowding that person. And if you look, even guys with like zero striking, like a Jared Brooks, who's a small, like practically strawweight, atomweight male fighter, right? The fact is, why did he have a successful first round when most guys are getting eaten up in that first round by Figueiredo? It's because he initiated. And sometimes that makes the difference, especially if you have the right tools. Now, Figueiredo's big, athletic. His wrestling has improved, even though it does look like he's been doing less trips to the States in recent camps. Still, his wrestling has improved. That being said, I'm not sure it's going to be as improved, against one of the better wrestlers in the division. Not just one of the better wrestlers, but the way Alex Perez takes guys down, he's not dependent on the cage like most weight classes. In fact, he does his best work in the open, which I like because Figueiredo, most of his improvements are defending from the cage and in the clinch. It is in the open takedowns where he seems to have no answer. Maybe he can grab a guillotine, but here's the thing. Even though Figueiredo's got a dangerous guillotine, who else has really good front choke threats? It's Alex Perez. And typically, if you're really good offensively with a move, you tend to know the defense. So I know I'm going long-winded here, but the point is, it's a game of matchups. I'm a big fan of Benavidez and Pantoja, but it's matchup dependent. Look at the Benavidez, Formiga, and Figueiredo love triangle, right? One guy beats the other guy beats the other. It's this weird love triangle. Where does Perez fit? Now, Perez just lost to the guy who Formiga destroyed, or not Formiga, Figueiredo destroyed twice in Benavidez. And I think that's burnt into our heads. But I also think we have to remember that MMA is a game of matchups. And I guess that's all I'm presenting here. Does it mean Perez is going to win? No, but I do believe that if we look at matchups in the entire division, I feel like he is the flyweight with the best chance to beat Figueiredo as of now.
Well, I mean, we don't really have proof that he can wrestle past the first round. He's never wrestled anyone for 3 straight rounds. But let me say this real quick. Because I feel like I love you, Dan Tom, but I feel like I heard some selective reasoning there. I feel like you mentioned something about a sauna suit 4 days out. I mean, look, no matter what, this guy is massive for the weight class. He's going to have a big weight cut. Sure. But how come there was zero mention of the fact that Alex Perez missed weight for flyweight in 2015? Alex Perez missed weight for flyweight in 2016. Then he goes to the UFC. He misses weight for flyweight in 2018 against Eric Shelton. It's Alex Perez who's missed weight at flyweight way more than Deiveson Figueiredo. So I think if anyone's having a brutal weight cut here, it's the guy that took the fight on short notice.
Mention it because I don't think it's going to be a factor, and maybe I didn't mention that enough, but I could have swore I snuck that in there as far as I'm not getting too hung up on the Figueiredo weight thing or the cardio thing. But the Alex Perez one, he actually had a similar situation regarding an airport, which was the same excuse that Figueiredo had. Perhaps that's another reason. So we can just count them a wash on that, right? And not to mention that Eric Shelton fight, he actually wrestled for 3 hard rounds. And not only did he miss the weight cut, have the travel delay, but he had some illness and sickness, which out of respect, I always respect when the guys don't get into it. He didn't want to use it as an excuse, but he was disappointed with his performance. For not being aggressive and getting a guy like Shelton out of there. And even though Shelton might not have aged well, may have been overinflated, the fact was that was good. I wanted to see a sample size of Perez being able to wrestle for 3 hard rounds. We already know he can go 5 rounds back in the Tachi Palace days, something that Figueiredo, although he's technically been scheduled one more time for a 5-round affair than Perez, he's never actually had to go there. And although I was very impressed with that Pantoja fight, I feel like it's quietly one of Figueiredo's best sample sizes, by the way, because of his pace management. Like, you could see that, like, okay, he's not a cardio freak, he's not an output guy, but that's not Figueiredo's style. So I don't know how much we can, crucify him for that. Whereas I was actually very impressed by that Pantoja fight because he found his right moments. And even in rounds, like I believe round 2, that Pantoja had a chance of winning. You go about 45 seconds to the end, he saves his burst, he blasts Pantoja, bloodies his face, right? Unquestionably takes the round. Like, that's really impressive to me. And we could totally see that here. I believe that Figueiredo is the more durable and the more powerful guy. So seeing him stop or win by a knockout or a club and sub, I think is the most potent ways. Again, he's deservedly favored. I'm not arguing that here. And as I see that being the most potent ways of him being finished, But lest we not forget, not only is it the weird triangle and matchup thing that I want people to consider, but again, I've been saying it every time since, and it's only kind of come to light recently. But even Benavidez admits himself, there was a headbutt. There were actually 2 headbutts in that fight, plus all the questionable ref stopping that allowed him to take those shots, a lot of them which on the back of the head. So it's really weird to say. That being said, here's what worries me, Dan. Alex Perez has like a magnet for right hands before that fight. And maybe this is what you were talking about. He looked like he was like kind of rock and shook in a couple fights before that fight too.
Shorty Torres.
However, since that fight, but maybe that's something to do with Mexicans. Page note that. I love my Mexican warriors, because page note that he's shown a durable chin and a way to, been able to take it since. Hasn't had any problems with his weight cut since that 2018 point, right? Figueiredo, on the opposite hand, you could argue that actually he was actually getting rocked. I never remember him getting rocked, but you go back to Moraga, which, yes, Moraga even rocked DJ in his prime, right? Okay, Moraga hits hard. But even Joseph Morales actually kind of looked like he kind of rocked him at a certain point. And again, what was the common thread back to it? They were taking initiative. Morales had a hard time taking initiative. He looked stiff and kind of scared most of the fight. But when he did, that's when he had those moments of success. Now, what's the common thread there? Or even on the other side with the Shorty Torres example or Benavidez? I mean, some tough Mexicans there. Now, Figueiredo's got another Mexican in front of him and Alex Perez. So, in my opinion, if Alex Perez's chin can take it, then I think his chances go exponentially up. I think the fact that he's training with guys like Chito Vera and other world-class black belt level grappling specialists that Team Oyama brings in there, plus his wrestling pedigree, I think he can be fine in positional play. If you look at Figueiredo, it's the initial scrambles he needs, but guys who know good wrist control and good positional play have really stymied him, and I see all those check boxes being checked off in Alex Perez's style. He hates when he has to wrestle and go to these more decisions, but to me, Dan, those were his more impressive performances. And, if I'm in his corner, that's what I'm hoping they're kind of drawing on, not to mention the potential calf kicks. It's something that he's gotten better at. He didn't just mysteriously finish Jussier Formiga his last time out. And when I look at Deiveson Figueiredo's statistics, at least half of the people who have ever thrown leg kicks at him, not everybody did it meaningfully, by the way, but whether it's 2, whether it's 15, or whether it's 24 in some cases, they landed at 100% clip or upwards of an 80% clip. Now, Figueiredo did show a check or 2 in his last fight against Benavidez, which tells me he may be working on this, folks, right? That's good for Figueiredo. However, overall, statistically, and given his style, he does give those kicks, and it could only take a couple of those wrong kicks for perhaps something to go wrong and whatnot. We'll see. I just feel like that it's a bit closer than the odds lead on. Now, here's the problem, Dan, where I could be walking into a trap, and I'm warning anybody who's following me off this cliff here. Just because there's a legitimate argument for a fight being closer, that doesn't mean the favorite's not going to win here. So I could be very well falling into this trap, and I'm readily going to admit that. But my pick's going to be Perez to wrestle Figueiredo by a decision, and I hope I'm wrong, because I love Figueiredo. Just because you pick against someone, folks, doesn't mean you're not a fan of him. I hate that shit. Cut that shit out if that is you. However, I've been calling for Figueiredo versus Jan before. Most of y'all gave a fuck about Figueiredo. So before anybody throws anything at me saying I'm not a Figueiredo fan, you can go F yourself, because I actually hope I'm wrong about this so we can see that Jan fight. But yes, as an analyst who's unbiased, I'm going with Perez by decision.
Listen, I mean, Figueiredo does fight with his hands down. Perez does hit hard, so I mean, it could happen. Man, it's just I just don't see it happening. I think that who's the more durable out of the two? I got to go with Deiveson Figueiredo. I think he's the more explosive guy. I think he's the better athlete. I just think he's the better fighter, period. And I think that, if Perez is out here trying to take him down, I mean, unless Deiveson is severely gassed out, I think his explosive get-up game is going to get him back up standing, and I think he's going to land something. Listen, we can talk about the Benavidez fight being a head clash, not a headbutt, a head clash. Headbutt insinuates that it was intentional. I don't think it was intentional, but if it was intentional, well, then karma's a bitch, because you saw him head clash with Deiveson the very next fight and get knocked out, right? So, but that being said, man, I'd wager that a Deiveson punch is harder than a Joseph Benavidez head clash, even though Joseph does have a big head. Don't get me wrong. But listen, all bullshit aside, I think Davison's going to catch him in the first 3 rounds. So I'm going, and still Deiveson Figueiredo. But listen, man, I mean, if you're picking the guy outright, he's plus 250. So you might as well take it to the betting window. I mean, like, you think it's this 50-50 fight and the guy's plus 250. Like, that sounds like a bet to me from your side. But I'm going with the champ.
Hey, you're not wrong by those instincts there, Dan. That's also why I laid the caveat, as in don't follow me off the cliff. When I say that, it's for a reason, folks, but you're right about that number.
Well, I mean, listen, I mean, when you're on the opposite side of everybody and their mom, that's usually a good thing. Not saying that you are in this specific case, because I have seen Perez be a popular dog this week.
Really?
But I mean, it's the same people that were picking Benavidez. But that being said, yeah, for some reason, people got something against my boy Deiveson Figueiredo. I don't know what it is, but I'm sticking with the God of War. I think he defends his belt. Now, Dan, Tom, let's not even waste the fans' time with this co-main event between Valentina Shevchenko and Jennifer Maia. I mean, listen, I'm going to pick for Dan Tom. I know Dan Tom's got Valentina Shevchenko. We didn't talk before this fight. It's just, I guess what I can't pick for Dan Tom is it going to be a knockout, a submission, or a decision?
You know, despite the small cage, hopefully making for more of a fun fight, Dan, I'm going to go with the old patterns, and the patterns don't always hold through. Just ask Random Marcos about win-loss, right? However, it's been a finish decision for Shevchenko since she's moved to flyweight. So let's stay with that theme. I think, speaking of big heads, and by the way, it's no hate. I've got a big head here. I say it about every episode. But speaking of big heads, I think Maia's durable, man. She's a real tough girl. She's got the black belt in Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu. Say what you will about those ranks and her levels. I'll say that it's enough to survive. I'm going to go Shevchenko by decision.
I don't know if you recall a fight back in Cage Warriors a long ass time ago between Sheila Gaff and Jennifer Maia. 10 seconds into the fight, Sheila Gaff blasted her into the fifth dimension. And I think Saturday night in Las Vegas, Nevada, Valentina Shevchenko is going to do the same thing. I'm saying a knockout, man. So I'm going. Let's see what the under is. I'm actually kind of curious here. Okay, they're saying 2.5. That's kind of conservative. If it was 4.5, then I'd take the under there. But 2.5, Vegas knows what they're doing. I mean, you look across the board, you see some minus 1375. You see some minus 1500s. So even minus 1700 is the biggest, or minus 1800 is the biggest number I see. I mean, you're not going to get a debate from me. I don't think that Jennifer Maia has a snowflake's chance in hell. I think that. I mean, because she finished Joanne Calderwood in the first round. I'm supposed to give her a shot here. Like, Marina Moroz finished Joanne Calderwood in the first round. Jessica Andrade finished JoJo in the first round. Finishing JoJo in the first round doesn't mean shit to me. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, if anything, I think the line's short. I think she should be minus 5,000. I think that you shouldn't even get a chance to put down money on her because she's a lock. I mean, the only way that Valentina loses this fight is if she hasn't been training, and even if she hasn't been training, she wins this fight, and she has been training because that's who she is. She's a martial artist. The only way is if she's so severely injured that she can't even lift her limbs up, or she slips and breaks an ankle, or a cut stoppage, some bullshit, a DQ. Like, that's literally the only chance Maia has. I think the line's perfectly justified.
Got to be a DQ, and you got to have Goddard in there not calling for the replay to correct it either.
Oh my God. Can you believe that shit? And I was starting to defend Goddard because I thought he was making some strides, but then on Contender Series in the JP Buys fight, not saying JP wasn't going to win that fight, but it's like, dude, he didn't tap, he didn't go to sleep. At least let's check the instant replay. There was a lot of pride going on there, wasn't there?
Dude, total ego, and it's going to take that level of fuckery, to your point, Dan, for Maia to pull off some kind of assisted stunt. It's not even just a stunt. It's got to be an assisted stunt, right, Dan?
Well, I like that. I'm gonna use that, an assisted stunt. I like it, Dan Tom. We're both going with Valentina. He's going by decision. I'm going by knockout. Let's see what happens. Featured bout in the welterweight division. We got Platinum Mike Perry taking on the Dirty Bird Tim Means, and this is the second fight in a row where Platinum's gonna have the girlfriend in the corner. This time she's pregnant, so shout out to Mike Perry's got a baby on the way. Very excited for them. I mean, I don't know them personally, but anytime you're a child's entering the world, I wish them nothing but the best, fullest health and all that kind of stuff. And I gotta say, man, it's probably pretty fucking stressful to be in the corner while you're having a baby. Listen, I've never been pregnant in my life, so I can't attest if that's true or not, but I would assume that just me not even being related to some of these guys, I get nervous when I see these fights. I can imagine being in the corner with the guy's baby, and you got the straight punches and the parrying game of Tim Means. I'd be pretty fucking worried, Dan Tom.
I would too. In this case, perhaps a fighter, or more specifically, Mike Perry's prioritization on things in life may actually serve him well in this case, right? Because he might actually still be focusing number one on the fight despite all those things. That being said, one thing I have heard from, I mean, again, ignorant guys here speaking from the ignorant guy's perspective. We're not trying to fool everybody. We're having fun here, folks, right? This is entertainment. But the one thing I have heard from the guy's perspective, Dan, because I'm in the same boat as you, I don't know, right? Is that the guy can tend to eat like he's the one that's pregnant, if you know what I'm saying. And I know I said that I wasn't, I stepped off the gas and in fact defended Figueiredo as far as the weight goes. But the last fight we talked about and this fight we talked about, boy, is my radar going off. And quickly referencing, not to jump back to the last fight, but with Jennifer Maia in the co-main event, people who listen to my podcast know I pretty much called both of her weight misses before they happened, just by watching the IG profile. And it's a weird thing I do. I just always size people up, even from my competition days, and especially with this game. And I'm sure you have your own radar, perhaps, Dan, your own methods of research, right? But sometimes some flags will go off when you're looking at their Instagram and even just by their shape of their body, seeing how he was moving and in the bag work. And I was like, man, Perry looks a little heavy, because Perry, even by his own admission, has made weight cuts harder than they need to be. I mean, this guy, he's not the biggest welterweight. He should be fighting at welterweight. I think he's healthy there. But the guy's fought at 155 as an amateur before, which is another reason why I probably, had a lot of those chinny issues. If you go back and watch those fights, neither here nor there. The point is, he's looking pretty big. Then sure enough, I click on those damn stories because, every app's got to have the story now. And dude, he's eating burritos, like giant In-N-Out burgers. And it's all like within like 3 hours of today, Dan. Like I'm talking about within an hour of jumping on the Line Movement betting show, I popped on his IG. We're in fight week, folks. And this guy is literally eating a burrito as of a few hours from now. And he's already looking heavy in the lead up. And again, you know what they say, back to the ignorant guys talking about ignorant stuff. We tend to take pregnancy on like the women, so we don't have the excuse for our eating. You know what I'm saying? We're not feeding another body in there. So, man,
I'm gonna use that from now on. Also,
yeah, I'm gonna make two picks. I'm gonna pick that Mike Perry misses weight, and I'm gonna pick against him here.
Yeah, look, I uncharacteristically picked Mickey Gall to beat Mike Perry for a reason. I mean, listen, I had the biggest bet of my life on Randy Brown to beat Mickey Gall. I bet on Diego Sanchez to beat Mickey Gall. I know Mickey Gall, he's had less than 10 pro fights. He's as green as they come. But I uncharacteristically picked him to beat Mike Perry because it's like Mike Perry left his gym, Fusion Excel, under Julian Williams. He was training with Jacare and with Rodolfo Vieira, all these great fighters. Not anymore. Now he's training, his girlfriend's holding pads. No offense, she seems like a nice lady, but like, she doesn't have a background in martial arts, right? So I was thinking it was this big joke. And Mickey didn't win the fight, but Mickey won the first round on all three judges' scorecards, Dan Tom. And until Mickey gassed out, Mickey was doing pretty damn good. It's just, the experience kind of took over. Mike showed that, hey, he can still beat, guys that are borderline UFC caliber. And because, like, one of Mike's former training partners, I'm not going to name names. I can tell you off air, but he told me Mike didn't just leave the gym. Mike left planet Earth. This is what he said before the Mickey Gall fight. So, I took my shots on the plus 285 on Mickey Gall. Didn't go my way, but I'm not backing off that train here, my man. I mean, listen, I know Tim Means has had some durability issues, and listen, he's only been knocked out one time in like over 40 fights, so we can talk durability issues all we want, but the reality is it's not like he's out here, like Keith Jardine was getting knocked out every single fight or anything like that. You know what I mean? Listen, Daniel Rodriguez is a very good boxer for MMA standards. Oh, yeah. Nico Price is one of the heaviest hitters in the history of the division. It is what it is. Not saying Perry can't clip him behind the ear, on the temple, on the chin, whatever the case may be, and knock him out. He probably can. It's just that I have to stick to my guns, man. I don't think that Perry's training like a professional anymore. I don't think that he's taking this shit serious. I think that, like his former training partner said, he didn't just leave the gym, Dan Tom. He left planet Earth. And I think Tim Means is going to come out here. I think he's going to parry the shots. I think he's going to throw some nice stuff down the middle. I think he's going to mix in body kicks. I think he's even going to mix in takedowns. It's just, don't get caught and you win this fight. So if we're talking about a don't get caught scenario, why are we looking at Tim Means as the underdog? If I'm looking at him as the underdog, that means that, maybe he comes back and wins. Maybe he's losing the entire fight, then lands that big shot. Whereas, like, I see that being Perry's path to victory, losing the entire fight and then landing the big shot. So if that's what I see, Perry needs to be the dog. Means needs to be the favorite. I'm going Tim Means here to light this kid up.
Absolutely. And we're not gossip hounds here, folks. Even though we keep referencing these things, we reference these things because you should keep them in mind. And in our defense, I believe all the examples we cited as far as things that can be labeled as, oh, excuses, fighters say these things, we're correlating them with actual factual results, folks. We're not just taking everything the fighter says, oh, they said this, they said that. Like, no. He said this and had a really bad performance and lost. And then the next fight looked completely different. So whether or not how much we want to believe them is up to you, but there's definitely something there. So that's why we bring these things up, folks. We're not telling you to go to the bank off of gossip. But yeah, Tim Means was dealing with a lot of personal tragedy and loss, losing multiple family members and community members before that Daniel Rodriguez fight. And D-Rod, who we may talk about, and is another person you'll probably see me writing up on as well as Tim Means on the line movement betting sheet this week, is a proven product. So whether it's a loss or a win, when I'm trying to gather information for the future, I value information when it comes from two proven products more than someone who left planet Earth, as that beautiful quote was just dropped on us.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not sitting here saying it's Max best season. I know that Tim Means is towards the end of his career. I know that Tim Means, his durability isn't what it once was. I know that he has pulled stunts before, but I also know that he's the underdog in this spot. And I think at the very least, it should be a pick 'em fight. And
Yes.
listen, you take shots on underdogs from time to time. This is one where I'm willing to take that gamble. So I got Tim Means to win this fight.
I don't blame you. I'm with you. And that bag work alone this time and last time had me picking goal with you last time. So the bag work doesn't look any better, Dan. I'm taking Means this time.
Now, Dan Tom, in the flyweight division, we got a matchup between Cynthia Calvillo and Caitlin Chookagian. And man, I love the transition Cynthia Calvillo's made to 125 pounds because, look, she was always like one of the meanest girls at strawweight. Usually she takes your back. She might choke you out. She can pound these girls out. But not only that, Dan Tom, it's not like she's some like front runner either. She's so tough. Like, to take the kind of shots she took from Marina Rodriguez and then come back in that third round and put it on her the way that she did. And then, it's easy to sit here and say, oh, but Cynthia's one-dimensional. She's only got the ground game. And then you see her next fight against Jessica Ai when she moves up a weight class. She was out there out-striking Jessica Ai. She was out there putting on an MMA clinic against Jessica Ai. She gave Jessica Ai a tour of the Octagon. So I'm so impressed with how Cynthia Calvillo looks at 125 pounds. And with Caitlin Chookagian, listen, with no crowd there, her style works well with those judges. Run around, throw a bunch of punches at the air, make those tennis sounds, do a bunch of bullshit. And that's going to work against certain people. But that's not going to work against Cynthia Calvillo. She's too mean. She's not going to accept, being weaseled. She's not going to accept, losing to someone that's not truly fighting, no disrespect. And you take it a step further. I mean, we talked about this during the Andrade breakdown. I mean, Caitlin's got one foot out. She's talking about having a baby. She's talking about retiring. She's talking about this could be my last fight. Well, she got stopped in the first round in that fight. So why am I supposed to believe that 3-4 weeks later it's going to be any different? I got Cynthia Calvillo to put it on her. I'm going with Cynthia for the win.
Yeah, this was another one where, you can make the argument that maybe the line shouldn't be this wide, Dan, but it's not enough of an argument to get me to go away from the favorite here. Obviously, I like who Calvillo is working with. She's at my backyard of Extreme Couture, working with other striking coaches who helped Misha Tate in her heyday in her championship run. Another female fighter who needed to get to her grappling, in other words. And I essentially see Cynthia Calvillo, even though I was worried about the size. I mean, she's 5'4", and I believe even her reach is comparable to Jennifer Maia, who is fighting for the title on the very same card in the very same division. However, even though she does kind of the shuffling, indecisiveness at times on the feet, I got to imagine that's getting better with that previous note. I do believe she's a more dangerous version of Jennifer Maia, being that her wrestling is way better and her scrambling and submissions. But speaking of her wrestling, I also like that she counters off of kicks. It's why I picked her against fighters like Marina Rodriguez, who you could argue is a more dangerous and more meaningful striker. I believe I got the name right. Marina Rodriguez. That's who she fought to the draw or something. But she, and if you look, some of the takedowns that she did score, which ended up saving her ass, in that fight, arguably, right? They were off of kicks and coming forward. So if Chookagian is just throwing those for window dressing and to score points. Those tend to be the easier kicks to counter if Calvillo wants them. I do think she'll have an advantage there. Chookagian's shown some better performances in the small cage, I believe, a la Antonina Shevchenko, but obviously the grappling levels are way different. And if, in fact, the small cage does encourage more action from Chookagian, I actually think that might actually hurt her because that could force more scrambles where even though she's a brown belt under Renzo Gracie, got to be close to that black by now, right? Still, I will give to the advantage to the technically unranked fighter in Calvillo. I don't know if she gets it done inside the distance, Dan. I'm going to pick Calvillo by decision here, though.
And look, Chookagian told James Lynch that, that quote about her retiring was taken out of context and this and that. And, it's easy to backtrack after you already said something like that. But I'm not basing, that quote off some fucking headline. I heard those words come out of her mouth. I heard her say she's looking to have a baby. And when you start bringing the baby into the conversation, especially in that division, I ain't backing you at the betting window. I don't give a shit what the line is. So, and I mean, maybe I should be the one backtracking and say I don't give a shit what the line is, because it's not like she's, because if she was fighting some random scrub and it's that price, hey, I'm taking Caitlin there. You have to be a certain level to beat Caitlin Chookagian. It's just when you're talking about someone as mean, as determined, as all in as Cynthia Calvillo, any hint of retirement, and I mean, I really didn't like the matchup stylistically for her, but now you're talking about, I only got a couple fights left and then I'm ready to call it quits. Well, Cynthia's gonna help you see the door, so I got Cynthia Calvillo all day here. Now, Dan Tom, we got the rematch in the light heavyweight division between Mauricio Shogun Rua and Paul Craig. And I know for a fact, if I would have told you 5 years ago that Paul Craig went to a draw with Shogun, you would have laughed in my face. And to take it a step further, I know damn well you would have laughed at me if I would have told you that Paul Craig would be a favorite over Shogun in a fist fight on a Saturday night inside a steel cage. And it's 2020, my man. What a fucked up year. Paul Craig is a favorite over Shogun. I mean, they fought once before. We saw how the fight went. Not only do I disagree with that fight being scored a draw, I also disagree with that first round being 10-8. I mean, Paul Craig throws one big flurry where most of the punches are blocked, and you're giving him a 10-8 based off that? Like, really? Like, come on now. But, how I feel doesn't matter because you see how these judges are. So he might do that shit again, and he might get another 10-8. And also, much love to the legend Mauricio Shogun, future Hall of Famer, former champion, former Pride champion, former UFC champion. I mean, what's not to love about Mauricio Shogun, or as we like to say in Brazil, Dan Tom, Mauricio Shogun? Love that guy. One of the original all violence fighters, and it just sucks that he gets rocked every single fight. You know what I mean? And a guy like Paul Craig, he has been improving. Look, he's getting more confident in his stand-up. He used to be just kind of that guy that would have the fluke comeback wins with the third round triangles, but now he's knocking guys out in the first round. So he's getting more comfortable. But listen, man, if he doesn't get Shogun out of there in that first round, I still think Shogun's got the vet tactics to come out here and win this fight, to possibly catch Craig or mix in the takedowns like he's been doing. It just sucks that, like, Shogun's supposed to be so much better on the feet than Paul Craig, and he was out there like having to weather a storm against Paul Craig. It's like Mauricio, So I hope that doesn't happen. It probably will happen. I know Paul Craig's going to come out with a lot of intensity, and also Paul Craig is on the way up. Shogun's on the way down, so maybe he's catching him at the perfect time. But I am not going to disrespect Mauricio Shogun Rua and pick Paul Craig against him in a fight. So I got Mauricio, and I think this time he knocks him out in the first round.
Jesus. I think I took Mauricio the first time. I'm pretty sure I did, actually. That shouldn't be too much of a question. But I'm trying to see what this opened as. I know he's a favorite now. Yeah, he opened as the favorite. Man, I'm gonna go Craig here, man. I don't want to. I'm rooting against this pick, clearly. But it was the striking, kind of like you said. That was the biggest flag to me. I mean, it's no surprise to me that Shogun's a ground and pound guy. He kind of always has been quietly. You know what I'm saying? Not that he hasn't had good striking, but to see the level plus his durability, both how he wears it and, wobbles, getting rocked, that's the biggest worry for me. And Paul Craig, I was worried that he was just going to be the one trick pony. And, I'm not saying he's going to be a world champion, but it's just like, he has overachieved, in fairness. Now, maybe that's because I had really low standards. I thought he just had the triangle choke, from his guard, and that's it. But like in his defense, he's really worked on his wrestling, his cardio, his striking. Is he world beaters? Will he ever be world beaters in these areas? No, but he has worked on them, made measurable improvements, and brought them into fights, and he deserves credit for that. And the sad part is, if his cardio holds up, I think he can. I think it's going to be another sloppy, really ugly, and depressing fight. That's going to be somewhat competitively close, but I'm thinking Craig's going to hurt him. And I agree with you, Dan, on rewatch, especially when you're not taken by the moment. You're like, how did this get scored the 10-8, right? But and not to get on a side tangent, but it is relative to this matchup, their first matchup, and why I'm picking Craig to win this matchup. Probably on the scorecards, oddly enough. Although I wouldn't be surprised to see like a really sad TKO win from Craig happen, is because judges have been they've almost been overcorrecting the steering wheel, right? We're like, okay, stop letting the fighters steal takedowns, rounds with takedowns at the end of the round. And the judges kind of wised up to that in their credit. However, they still can be swayed. But now it's like they're going the complete opposite way with damage, to where it's like you can outclass a guy, land more feet, land more this, land more that, get a takedown. But if that one guy does a really damaging, it gets the sound, maybe gets a bruise or something, like he's winning the round. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, by the way. I'm all about damage being prioritized. I just feel like we're seeing a trend in judging where they're almost overcorrecting these steering wheels. You know what I'm saying? I do want to see more 10-8s, but they're not really giving the 10-8s at the right time. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to be picky, but I'm just calling what I see. So I'll go with Paul Craig for more damage.
Now, Dan, Tom, in the flyweight division, we got a number one contenders bout between Brandon, the assassin baby Moreno, or as I like to call him, the assassin adolescent, and he's taking on Brandon Raw Dog Royval. And this is a hell of a fight, man. Going into the tape, I was thinking I'm probably going to like Brandon Moreno a lot here. I was thinking that, he's paid his dues. He's probably ready for this title shot. But the more I watched it, I was like, man, I don't know, because Royval looked incredible his last fight against Kai Kara-France. Like, okay, the Tim Elliott fight, he kind of took on a week short notice, so wasn't his best performance. He still submitted Tim Elliott. He still cashed that underdog ticket. So I still got to give a shout out to my boy Raw Dog Royval. But the Kara-France fight, like, dude, when I say that his activity was on point from start to finish, I mean, he literally did not stop throwing the entire fight. Like, even when he got clipped with Kai Kara-France's right hand, which is Kai Kara-France's one big weapon that everybody knows about, Kai Kara-France's right hand, gets back up and throws a spinning elbow, like the John Jones, the Yair zombie one, you know what I mean? Drops. And like Royval, I like this kid a lot, man. And I feel like now that he's actually training full time, because before I think he was like working at like a juvenile detention center or like a jail, or something among those lines. He was giving back to the community, so much respect to Brandon. But and apparently he was only getting like 4 hours of sleep every night, which that'll fuck with you, especially when you got to recover. Sleep is a huge part of recovery. So now 250K bonuses later, Dan Tom, he doesn't have to work that job anymore. Now he gets to train full time. So you're going to see exponential leaps in his game every single time we see him. And speaking of exponential leaps, you compare the assassin baby that we see now compared to the one a couple of years ago. I mean, if we would have talked number one contender fight a couple of years ago, you would have laughed in my face, back when he was losing to Pantoja twice, not once, twice. But now, like, that performance he put on against Formiga, he also beat Kai Kara-France. In my opinion, he beat Askarov.
Yeah, he beat Askarov. He did beat Askarov. You're right.
So I think he's been doing his thing. He's looking better than he's ever looked. I think the boxing and the wrestling should go to Moreno, but I think the Muay Thai and the Jiu-Jitsu goes to Royval, and the activity goes to Royval too. So it could either be a Brandon Moreno kind of vet lesson type scenario where he kind of shows him, hey, there's levels to this shit. You still got to pay your dues a little bit more, like I have. You know what I mean? I could totally see that happening. And that's what I thought was going to happen when I went to the tape. But I was so damn impressed with that Kai Kara-France fight that I'm actually going to I'm going to roll the dice on the dog here. I'm going to go with Royval. Let's see what happens. I think he can stay active the entire time and edge out a decision.
I like that. And this is not a fight where it's like, I don't think anybody should be too hard on either side. And these are definitely two guys you should be liking and a fan of. But yeah, some dissension here, which is good, because I think that this is a fight where it's line close for a reason. I don't think you can make too much of a fuss. I know, I've been making my classic comments, whether I agree with it or not, that, maybe this line's a little wide. or this line's this. But no, I'm totally cool with this line. I don't have an issue with it. I'm not going to nitpick it. I am going to pick Moreno here. And Royval, man, I love Royval. I think you had a great explanation with him, Dan. Royval, by the way, one of my Glover. There's certain guys like are some of my favorite cashes so far this pandemic season, if you want to call it that. And Brandon Royval over Kai Kara France. I mean, getting the plus 2-1 number was just beautiful. And again, nothing
Good
against
job.
Kai Kara France, but like Askar Askarov, I think they're easily the two most overrated guys in the division. And I just been waiting for my spots. I'm still waiting for my spot on Askarov. He got lucky because his hard matchups got matched up elsewhere, in my opinion. But anyways, neither here nor there. We'll get to Askarov when that time comes. But yeah, man, I'm a big fan of Brandon Royval. I would not be surprised if he wins this fight. However, if you look at it, I think he's like out of all 5 decisions that he's ever been to, he's lost 4 of them and won 1. Whereas, you know, Moreno's got an unhealthy kind of decision record too. But the thing about Moreno, if you look at his losses, he's never been stopped or submitted. So essentially, you have to beat this guy by submission. Whereas Royval's only won 1 decision. Now he is getting better, not only because he's at the age, but again, folks, we're not saying these things like fighter excuses. We're bringing them up because they correlate. And Dan was spot on with that story of the juvenile detention centers. The guy wasn't getting any sleep. In fact, I always confuse Royval's story with Alex Perez in the main event because they both had similar situations where they were working overnights and not getting any sleep until they finally made it to the UFC. So coincidentally, if you look at past performances or past losses, you see them correct those mistakes after. And I think a lot of that's for a reason. When you get to that UFC level, when you're putting the big focus on, when you're training full time, you said it beautifully, Dan, with Royval. And I think we're seeing that with him. So again, to see him come out and make the jump, I would not be surprised. But I don't know if he's going to have the opportunistic finishes against a guy who can kick and box as well. Obviously, a bit more of a boxer than a kicker. But man, I think it was Dustin Ortiz level with the head kick before he subbed him, and Dustin Ortiz ain't an easy guy to finish. Brandon Moreno is better than that version that finished Ortiz back in, what was that, 2016 or 2017? He's only gotten better now. So I could see that. But to be honest, I feel like the safe bet from both were my perspective, perhaps our perspective, perhaps factoring where the line is, unless, if you like the underdog player, go shoot your underdog shot. I ain't going to be mad at you. But I do think the over, which has actually gone down in price now at a nice low point of entry, minus 110 or minus 120 the last time I looked. I feel like that's a safer bet because I feel like these guys are going to bring the best in both of each other. And they're both going to be, they both are already very hard to finish, being the fact that they're, tough Mexican warriors, but they are talented Mexican warriors. I don't think that the finish is going to be as easy as it's been for them in past fights, Dan. I'll take Moreno by decision. I think this goes long.
Another thing, I wouldn't hate the pass here, and I'll tell you why. I know, give me shit. I picked the dog outright, and now I'm suggesting a pass. I get it, throw a tomato at me, but I mean, honestly, man, like this is like one of those fights I want to sit back and enjoy as a fan. Like I really want to know what's going to happen. Like, is my gut feeling, the initial feeling I had pre-tape of Moreno kind of outclassing him going to happen? Or is my post-tape thought of like Royval actually, evolving into this fucking like not a world beater, but just like a guy that's constant action all 15 minutes of the fight. I mean, he doesn't stop. And like now that he's got that full camp, he can actually live out his potential. So I want to know what the deal is firsthand. So that's why we're going to tune in Saturday night. This is, the featured prelim right before the pay-per-view for a reason, because when you watch this exciting fight between these two studs, you're going to have incentive to go out there and buy the pay-per-view. So I can't wait. And let's see who the better man is Saturday night.
That's a great message, Dan. Don't be like me, like betting Casey Kenny. Yeah, my bank account might have went up a couple units, but the stress might have took my life expectancy down. Sometimes it is good to pass, in all seriousness.
And that was a sharp bet on Casey Kenny. I don't care what anyone says. Now, Dan, Tom, you know how I alluded to that 50K curse? Because now in the middleweight division, this might be a case where it applies. We got Joaquin Buckley taking on Jordan Wright. And listen, Joaquin Buckley had one of the most devastating knockouts in UFC history against Impa Kasanganay. I didn't see that coming from a mile away, I'll tell you that much. But the reason I bring up the 50K curse, not saying it's going to happen here, might not, but this is a kid in Joaquin who, never seen that kind of money before in his life. And no, let's be honest, not to disrespect him, but no one gave a shit about him prior to that knockout. Now all of a sudden, Ariel Helwani wants to talk to him. Everyone wants to talk to him. Everyone's his best friend. Everyone's talking about, oh, this is the greatest knockout I've ever seen in my life. Now all of a sudden he can do no wrong. Now all of a sudden he's God's gift to fighting. You know what I mean? So I'm curious if, you know, that's changed his mindset at all. If he feels like, hey, I don't have to train anymore. I don't have to wake up at 6 a.m. and go on this 5-mile run anymore because I'm God's gift. Did you see what I did to Impa? Did you see that highlight reel everyone's been showing me? That was me. I don't got to wake up early anymore, you know? So if he's adopted a mindset like that, it's going to be very dangerous playing him, you know, at minus 250 in the spot. But if he kind of, you know, put all that stuff aside, invested the 50K, didn't listen to what anyone's talking about, because I know he's surrounded by good people. Actually, he's in there with Jamal Hill. Shout out to Jamal Sweet Dreams Hill. Awesome dude, great fighter. You guys are gonna see him do some good things. Chaos, the Ox fighter Williams, who just knocked out Razak Al Hassan. Like, holy shit, that kid is serious too. Like, god damn, that was a real knockout right there. And there's some other guys in there, but, you know, just to be surrounded by those two guys who are super focused, I'm hoping Joaquin Buckley is focused, because this is one of those fights. You know how we talked about that Tom Breeze versus, you know, that Canadian kid? I forget his name, but you know how
Buller.
I talked about,
yeah,
what was his name?
Buller.
Yeah, Bular. You know how I was talking about in that fight, how this fight has nothing to do with Bular. This fight's all about Tom Breeze. If Tom Breeze is focused, this is going to be a walk in the park. You know, this fight has absolutely zero to do with Bular. Just like this fight on Saturday night has absolutely zero to do with the Beverly Hills Ninja, Jordan Wright. I mean, look, I respect the kid. He's actually got some pretty explosive spins himself. So I actually see why they matched them up. He's got a nice little karate style. Actually has a really decent Muay Thai clinch too. He's training with Anthony Hardonk. So he's been doing some good things, but like you saw in Contender Series, if you just put the pressure on him, if you put it on him, he can't take it, man. He can give it, but he can't take it. So, you know, if Joaquin Buckley fights like he normally does, I think he's going to knock this kid out in the first round. It's just, to me, that 50K curse. Does he think he's invincible now? Does he think that, you know, he can do no wrong? Does he think he needs a red carpet to walk to the octagon now? You know what I mean? Because if he has any of that shit going on and he sits back, he's a little soft coming into this fight or whatever the case may be, Jordan Wright's a dangerous kid. He can throw some heavy spins. He can throw some big knees. I mean, so I'm just saying, you know, he's 11-1 for a reason. He's 11-1. He got knocked out by Anthony Hernandez. So don't even try me on some, you know, the win got overturned because he smoked some weed. Like, you're telling me the weed is the reason he knocked him into, you know, into next year. So I think that's total bullshit. So he's 11-1 as far as I'm concerned. But all that being said, if Joaquin's got his head on straight, if he's been training, if he didn't take his foot off the gas just because of that incredible result against Impa, he's going to come out here and knock this guy out in the first round. So I'm going to go Joaquin Buckley to win this fight.
You said it perfectly, Dan. I'm going to go with Buckley as well, but I could totally see it. Maybe it's because you put that canary in the coal mine in my head. It's one of my favorite things to watch for, that 50K thing, because it tends to be a golden road to the land of stunts. Shout out to your podcast, Half the Battle. So it's always something to watch out for. And, you know, just looking at it from the odds to the setup, you know, it would just be kind of sad MMA poetic justice for the guy to get the highlight, but miss the 200K or whatever promise that frankly he deserved. Buckley did. And then, you know, they're probably like, okay, well, like show us, you know, you win this fight, we'll up your contract even more, et cetera, et cetera. And then he would go out and drop the ball and then kind of not get paid for his moment, almost losing the moment to seize, if you will. That being said, win or lose, I still feel like Buckley's future will remain the same. He will be a dependable action fighter in the division. He should win this fight, but it'll be interesting to see. I don't know if I'm comfortable using him as a parlay piece or anything like that. I'll just say that.
Now, Dan Tom, moving down to the welterweight division, we got Daniel Rodriguez, D-Rod. He's taking on Nicholas Dalby. And this is a good fight, man. You know, I think that Nicholas Dalby doesn't always get the respect he deserves, but just one glance over his resume. He beat Zaleski in Brazil, Dan Tom. He went to a draw with Darren Till, and he beat Alex Cowboy Oliveira. Look, we're going to talk about his chin. We're going to talk about the mental stuff. We'll get into all that stuff here in a second. But I don't give a shit who you are. If you have a win over Zaleski in Brazil, if you beat Alex Oliveira, if you went to a draw with Darren Till, you're legit. Period, point blank. So, you know, people, you know, regarding, you know, disregarding him as if, you know, he's some bum or like, fuck that. Nicholas Dalby can fight. That being said, there's definitely some concerns with the durability, and I'll tell you why, Danton, because he used to be known for being that guy that, you pull out the Easton baseball bat, you hit him as hard as you can in the jaw, and all of a sudden he's in your face, he's bouncing up and down. You're like, he's throwing high kicks back at you. You're like, yo, like, what's it going to take to stop this guy, right? So it used to be one of those things where it's like Dalby was like a zombie, man. But now that he's kind of not necessarily getting up there in age because he's still relatively young, but now that the damage is accumulating, he's not recovering as fast as he used to. And I actually, not to discredit the win of Jesse Ronson, but that was kind of a head scratcher, man. For Jesse Ronson to put you down like that, and because normally Dalby recovers when he gets dropped, but man, now it's starting to trend a little bit downhill, and I think that's the reason why Daniel Rodriguez is such a big favorite in the spot. In addition to the fact that D-Rod's been coming out here performing, man, and not only is he knocking guys out, not only is he submitting guys, he's putting up numbers. DraftKings players love a guy like Daniel Rodriguez. You look at his fight with Gabriel Green. Almost lands 200 strikes in that fight. You look at his fight with Tim Means, outboxes him, drops him, chokes him out in New Mexico, Dan Tom. You look at that fight against Dwight Grant, and Dwight Grant's one of the heaviest hitters in the division. Dwight Grant might have knocked him out and woke him up with a follow-up, but, it's not like D-Rod. If D-Rod would have covered up and let the ref intervene, no one would have held it against him. We would have just been like, hey, it was his first UFCL. Dwight Grant's a very hard hitter. He'll be back. The kid gets back up, and then he knocks Dwight Grant out. So I can't say anything bad about D-Rod. So listen, I think they're going to have a bit of a respectful striking match until D-Rod, lands that shot behind the ear, on the temple, on the chin, whatever the case may be. I like Dalby a lot, but I don't think he gets back up from this one. I'm going with D-Rod by knockout.
I like Dalby a lot too, Dan. But speaking of parlay pieces, yeah, man, the Jesse Ronson one was a head scratcher. However, those who remember, if they watched this show, July 25th, this was one of our early installments. So I know I talked about it, Dan. Now I'm not going to pump my chest. I believe I
Hey, real quick. Pump your fucking chest, son.
Well, I didn't pick Dalby, but I said Ronson is live, and that number, he's a live, he's a live dog. And I didn't just say it just because I had a feeling or anything like that. Although I did reference, Ronson's, amateur accolades and certain things that he's underrated that doesn't get a lot of shine. But I said he's a southpaw. And what's the common thread of Darren Till, Zach Cummings, Peter Sabata, Carlo Pedersoli in Cage Warriors, because he's technically is a UFC vet, and Jesse Ronson? Those are all the losses and draws on his records. Those are all southpaws. This guy is allergic to southpaws. And I brought this up even twice because we were recently talking about Alex Oliveira, who is the inverse. He's the opposite. Alex Oliveira lights up every southpaw like a freaking Christmas tree, no matter what the odds are. Go look at his record. So when you're looking at weird trends that you really can bank on, and you can, I will give you permission to follow me off the cliff on, folks. Boy, those are some solid effing ones. So yeah, I like Daniel Rodriguez a lot here, and I love Nicholas Dalby.
Now, Dan Tom, it's time to wrap up the show. But last but not least, we got a matchup between Jared Night Train Gooden making his UFC debut. He's taking on Alan Brahma Jouban. And listen, we could talk about my bias here in a second because, Jared Gooden, good friend of mine, actual friend of mine. When I say he's a good friend of mine, I don't mean that, we DM'd one time and he liked this guy's been in my house many times. You know what I mean? This is like my actual friend. I've seen him on his come up. He's also punched me in the face and choked me out many times, but I love this guy. So I'll talk about Jared in a sec because I got a lot to say. But as far as Jouban's concerned, Jouban is a guy I have always had a tremendous amount of respect for. Jouban's a guy that people are always giving him shit for being a male model. And I'm thinking to myself, like, wait, are you jealous of him or something? Because, like, why would you give a guy that fights the way he fights shit for being a male model? Every single time Jouban fights, it's life and death with that guy. So I fucking love Alan Jouban. Like, the way he fights, like, he's got all my respect and then some. Look, I respect anyone that steps in the cage. You know that, Dan Tom. But, like, when I think about guys I enjoy watching fighting, Alan Jouban's right up there. How can you not love Alan Jouban? So all the respect in the world for Alan Jouban. But the fight game is a very unforgiving sport, Dan Tom. And you know that when you're getting up there in age, and I'm not talking about, 34, 35, 30. He's going to be 39 next week. Okay. So Jouban has had an amazing run. He fought in the RFA back before it was LFA. He fought in the RFA. You know what I mean? You remember his UFC debut against Seth Baczynski. I know you remember when he got robbed in Brazil against Warley Alves. He's had some great fights along the way, some great knockouts. I remember when I cashed the under 1.5 on him to beat Brendan O'Reilly. I was like, there's no way in hell Brendan O'Reilly's beating Alan Jouban in a fight. You know what I mean? So Alan Jouban, I love the guy. I'm a big fan of his. But Jared Gooden, he's my friend, and I feel like he's paid his dues on the regional scene to get this opportunity. Because I remember when he was 9-2 as a pro, and we were talking about, hey, one day this guy's going to be in the UFC, but now he's 17-4. So he's got about as much experience as you can get on the regional scene, making it to the UFC. And he's only 26 years old. He's still just a kid, Dan. So he's making big improvements every single fight. He's 12 years younger than Alan Jouban. All right, when you talk about 10 years younger, that's already enough to, the dog is 10 years younger. The dog is 12 years younger in this spot. The only reason he's the dog is because it's his UFC debut. And, real quick, got to rep the Night Train Choo-Choo shirt. You know what I'm saying? This is the old school Night Train shirt. But look, I think that Jared is a very physical guy. I think he's big for the weight class. I think that, when you see a guy that looks the way he does, you'd think to yourself, well, he's just going to be a guy that just goes out there and, wings hooks or wings overhands. But actually, he's got kind of like a volume boxing style. You know what I mean? He's got good calf kicks. He's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. And it's easy to sit here and look at his resume and say, oh, he got knocked out by Bruno Oliveira. Guys, Bruno Oliveira fought in a contender series at 205 pounds. Okay, Jared is an 170-pounder. Jared had zero business in there with Bruno Oliveira. Basically, the backstory was, he got called and they were like, hey, we got this. They quote unquote made it seem like, hey, we got this bum Brazilian that's 36 years old who hasn't fought in 3 years. Just come out here and get a quick win real quick. He shows up to the weigh-ins, and you got this 6'5" Johnny Walker looking dude with an 81-inch reach. He got fooled. The fight game, they fuck you over sometimes. So he got screwed big time, taking a fight he had no business in. I mean, listen, you put Alan Jouban in there with that guy, and Alan Jouban's getting knocked out in the first round too. So it was what it was. But as far as Jared at his actual weight class, I mean, he went 5 rounds with Mike Graves, who, if you don't know about Mike Graves beat Vicente Luque. Mike Graves finished Randy Brown. And people are sitting here, I'm hearing all these breakdown shows talking about how Jared is first round or bust. If Jared is first round or bust, how come he won the 4th round against Mike Graves? If Jared is first round or bust, how come he's got a 3rd round flying knee knockout on his record, a 3rd round Superman punch knockout on his record? How come he went to LFA, beat Stephen Newell, who was 9-0 at the time, 30-26 on all 3 judges' scorecards? So he's first round or bust. I think that's total bullshit. I think people have seen his fights when he was up at 85s in the wrong weight class and he was a smaller guy. Yeah, he's wearing their weight a little bit, getting a little tired. Okay, but at his normal weight class. And the Bruno Oliveira fight was a blessing in disguise, because I remember hanging out with Jared and him being like, dude, I can't be knocked out. Like I can't be rocked. He's basically talking like he was invincible. We're like, Jared, like, it's 4-ounce gloves. Anybody can be knocked out. He's like, Daniel, I can't be knocked out. So he fought a guy that was 6'5" with an 81-inch reach. That guy finished him in the first round. And, for some people, they fall off the deep end. For Jared, he actually got serious about his career. Now he's dieting properly. Now he's waking up at 6 a.m. running 6 miles. Now he hired a private boxing coach. Now he's driving, fucking 15 hours to Florida to train with Julian Williams, and Rodolfo Vieira and Jacare and all these guys. So Jared is going to come out here on Saturday night and he is going to shine. Whether he knocks out Jouban in the first round, whether it's a gritty war and he kind of wears on him as the fight progresses. I like Jouban a lot, but Jouban said, I got 5 fights left on my contract. He said this on the James Lynch interview on Line Movement. Go to linemovement.com. Hit the subscribe button here, give this video a like, and you can check out James Lynch's interview with Jouban. Jouban said, I got 5 fights left on my contract, and I'm not even convinced I'm going to fulfill my 5 fights. He said, after this fight with Jared Gooden, me and my team, we're going to sit down, we're going to take a hard, honest look, we're going to see how much we got left. Dan Tom, that's not the kind of shit I like to hear, especially when you're talking about laying chalk. This is a dog or pass situation, and since I have, inside info, and I know that this guy is training hard, I'm all in on Jared here. I think Jared Nightchain Gooden finishes Jouban, and then he gets a 50K bonus. And I think we got a new rising contender in the welterweight division.
Yeah, man. Hey, man. Speaking of bias, I totally get you. And like, just the fact that I know that this guy is a close guy to you, a friend, and otherwise, like I'm already wanting to root for this guy. So I have to tell myself that to keep myself unbiased going into this. However, I too am a really big fan of Alan Jouban. Alan Jouban is one of the few fighters since now the Ronda Rouseys and stuff are gone that I can say I fought in the same organization as Jouban. Tough enough alum, baby.
Nice.
I think I just saw like some footage. Our dude at Mr. Honky over there posted of like a fight card that happened just a couple fight cards before the one I fought on, because he was fighting in Tough Enough when it was still a ring, before it went to a cage in like 2011, which I believe I fought on like the second show that it officially went to a cage. Like that's how long Jouban's been around. So I'm a big fan of this guy, but like Dan said in the beginning, and even I said in the beginning of this show with Figueiredo, just because you're picking one way or the other doesn't mean you don't like or appreciate a guy, folks. Get this straight, okay? It's you've been doing this as long as us, like you got to separate that stuff. You know what I'm saying? So as a betting man, when I'm looking at this, I'm a Jouban fan, but as a betting man, it is absolutely a dog or pass spot. Regardless of what side of the fence you end up on, listener who's watching this. To me, this is a classic dog or pass spot. Take Dan's bias out of what he just said and look at the facts of what he just said. And these should be things that should be flags if you're really looking at this objectively, from the retirement, the age angle. And the age angle jumps out to me even more, Dan, because I love how these guys parallel, especially when you do look at their resumes. Because aside from the age, like Gooden's coming in at a very similar stage that Jouban was. You look at the amount of regional titles in the weight classes. They're both brown belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when they entered the organization, right? Like there's a lot of similarities, except like you said, Gooden is much younger. So I love this parallel. I'm invested already and super interested to see where Gooden's going to go. Especially as a bettor, but even as an analyst, it's where I'm leaning. I got to go back and watch a little more on Gooden. I haven't quite gotten, full disclosure, folks, I haven't quite run my complete comb through that far down the card. But as a bettor, you absolutely believe I'm looking at the dog money. And I think people are scared because from the opening line, this hasn't moved too much. Maybe because they're not familiar with Gooden, even though his fights are available, folks. You don't need the inside information well, you do. That's why you're tuned in here. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying, to get an idea who this guy is, like you can go find footage on him. So I'm kind of surprised to see more people didn't jump on it, but maybe that's just me, Dan. Either way, I'm with you. This is definitely a dog or pass spot.
Well, I think the reason is because they see that Bruno Oliveira fight. I think that's the only reason. They say, oh, he got destroyed by Bruno Oliveira. Bruno Oliveira just lost on Contender Series, but they conveniently leave out the key details. He lost at 205 on Contender Series. Jared has zero business in a fight with Bruno Oliveira. So it is what it is, man. I mean, keep sleeping on him, so choo-choo, motherfucker.
I love it. I love it, man. I'm excited. I mean, I'm even more excited now after talking to you, my friend.
Yes, it's going to be great. So, Dan, Tom, thank you very much for joining me on this special edition of the Line Movement MMA betting show. It's great to have you back. Also, shout out to James Lynch for filling in. He did a great job. But I'm very happy my co-host is back here in the flesh somewhat. I know we're over the internet, but we'll go with in the flesh. It sounds good, right? So, Dan Tom, thank you very much. The fans can follow you at Dan Tom MMA. They can follow me at Best Fight Picks. Make sure you'll go to linemovement.com, subscribe to the Line Movement channel on YouTube, hit that bell so you get notified every single time we drop a video. Also, we're on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, so hook up that 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. We truly appreciate it. We'll be back next week for the next card. Also, got to give a quick shout out to everybody behind the scenes. Our producer, Jordan, Nick, Joe, Brian, Dan, James, everybody else. I know there's so many. So if I left anybody out, no, it wasn't ill intent. It was simply because I forgot. But I love you guys all. So thank you guys very much. And to all the fans, thank you so much for all your support. We truly appreciate it. Like I said, we'll be back next week. So everybody stay safe, enjoy the fights, and we'll speak soon.
What's up, everybody? If you enjoyed what you saw, be sure to hit that like button as well as subscribe to everything from us over here at linemovement.com.